this is a snapshot. US export figures from 2012 and 2013. So to the UK alone, which is the leading country in consumption of biomass, exports nearly tripled in 1 year. And that is a slightly old prediction from the European Renewable Energy Council, and this bar is the expansion of biomass. So it's the biggest component in future plans for meeting renewable energy and supposedly energy security. And where is this happening? It's in old coal-fired power stations being converted to biomass. Why? Because it's the easiest way of doing it. They're already set up to burn, they're already connected to the national grid. We have a known capacity, we have engineers and everything in place. And that's Drax, who is the leading and at the moment the only big conversion that's happened. Last year they converted one of their 6 units and burnt about 5 million tonnes of pellets, and when they finally convert half their capacity, it'll be 15 million tonnes a year, 1.5 times UK total biomass growth. And
Duncan, that's not just what the UK produces for biomass, it's for everything, pulp and paper and
yes,
everything else.
Thank you, Marie. Yes, the 10 million tonnes, 11 million tonnes that the UK produces is for all uses, including burning, but for all uses. So that's how biomass could be really skewing markets. And that bottom picture is forest in British Columbia destroyed for pelletization for UK markets. You can see the size of the tree. That is not plantation. And the other part of the portfolio is dedicated biomass power stations, which can burn anything because they're newly engineered, including the fast-growing trees from the global south. What I omitted to say about Drax is that it will tell you that it's only burning twigs, but we know from a Freedom of Information request that it can only burn slow-growing trees with a low bark content, which cuts out a sizable. Well, they cannot burn majority forest residues. They are burning whole trees around.
I'd like to hear more about that, but I'll talk back afterwards.
Good. I think there may be a little bit more in that presentation later. But yes, these are. No, we'll go on. And that's a map. You can see an awful lot of the UK capacity is on the coast because it is UK dependent. It is import dependent. Why is biomass bad? Because it destroys forests, and this is the point where I would show this excellent film, Forests Aren't Fuel. But we have evidence, and the Dogwood film evidences this, that a very major, in fact I think a majority supplier to Drax, Enviva, is on the west coast, on the east coast of the United States, sourcing mainly hardwoods from the old growth wetland forests. 80% of their sourcing is from hardwoods to go to biomass, to Drax. And the carbon implications of that are appalling, but also the biodiversity implications of that are terrible. This area is an area of immense biodiversity, both tree species and fauna. Very important wetlands. You can see how beautiful it is. And this is the picture of the supply chain going off to Europe, particularly from that area around North Carolina, and now also from Queen's Circle there. It harms people. The pollution from biomass is similar, as it were, in spectrum to coal. It doesn't produce so much sulfur dioxide, which is the thing that enables the old power stations to stay in business beyond the limit of the European emissions directive in 2016 by burning biomass, reducing their sulfur dioxide emissions. So this green lie that they're telling is basically so that it can stay in business and burn coal for longer. The top picture there is that, in fact, recycled biomass, which is a bigger and bigger component of UK biomass power stations. And the dust from recycled and from virgin biomass is a grade 1 carcinogen, according to the World Health Organization, and has very severe respiratory and other health effects. And of course the emissions are extremely high, unlike coal, in small particulates, PM10s, PM2.5s, and nanoparticles. And the smallest of those, there is no safe level for effects on human health. On the right, we have a picture from the Cerrado of a eucalyptus plantation marching across community land and biodiversity in the Cerrado. And the bottom, you can see what happens to the land underneath a eucalyptus plantation. It's carpeted with leaves and nothing survives. And of course it lowers the water table and dries up rivers. The people in this village, no consideration of their livelihood, which came from the rich biodiversity of the Cerrado.
Just quickly, the emissions from burning biomass compared with other, conventional sources of energy now are similar?
Yes. No, in terms of the effects on human health, the particulates are very impactful on human health, and they're much higher from biomass than they are from coal or gas.
Okay, so then direct sort of emissions out of the plants, the power plants will be less, but indirect emissions?
No, they'll be about the same.
About the same.
Yeah. I mean, you're not getting a better pollution deal from biomass at all.
These are local pollution problems as opposed to climate change.
Yes.
It's both.
No, but
Both
Yeah,
sides,
talking about
we're talking about
yeah.
here.
And finally, and this is one that, is where I started, it causes climate change. It's worse for the climate than the coal it is supposedly replacing. And this is part of Drax's lie about the carbon cycle. What they emit is neatly taken up by the trees. You can see the little carbon squares floating across and being reabsorbed there, except that it doesn't happen, as we said, burnt in seconds, decades to regrow. And the current best science is saying the minimum carbon spike, the delay in being taken up, which is known as carbon debt, is 35 to 200 years. And this is at a time when we should be reducing our emissions and trying to find every strategy possible for taking carbon out of the atmosphere. Big strategy, forests, which are being destroyed by this very technology. And this is a graphic by Ollie here, which shows the transport across from the States. All of these emissions impacts are actually not the point. The point is that carbon debt from the failure to regrow when you deforest at that rate. And we've done calculations on Enviva's pellets coming out of DEC's recent biomass carbon calculator, and we reckon that this particular supplier, major supplier of Drax, is 3 times worse than coal. And on average, we estimate about 50% worse than coal. Biomass is about 50% worse than coal.
Is that just coming from, that's including the transport?
The transport is actually a tiny proportion of the emissions, and that's the part that
Just
Drax
the emissions
has to account for in its accounting to the government, the emissions and the processing. And that is, accounting all those bubbles there, enables Drax to say we're 80% better than coal. But the moment you put the carbon debt into the equation, you've got a disaster.
Oh, that's
So that's the
And
land
currently, this is a very important point, currently the government has originated this piece of research but not changed the way it counts carbon. So they can still get the subsidies, they can still claim that they're better than coal because under the government's carbon accounting they do not have to account the carbon that comes from the tree and comes out of the stag.
You call that 80%?
No, they say they have an 80%, they're 80% better than coal, and they have to be 60% better than coal. But the moment we account the carbon debt, they're much.
And they presume that all the carbon that comes out is instantly reabsorbed?
Absolutely, yes. Well, it is. Stands to reason. Okay, now what do we do about this? 2 minutes. Ollie, take it. Yeah, I'm running away.
Well, we've got great public awareness.
Okay, yes. What we in Biofuelwatch are tasking ourselves with is changing the common sense, so that biomass becomes something that investors do not want governments, politicians cannot counter. So we need to raise public awareness and get that lever to having an impact, building the campaign and the movement. We need to prevent investments, because once the money's been paid over, it will happen. And that's a matter of public perception to bring pressure on the government, politicians, Department of Energy and Climate Change to change policy and subsidies, because without the subsidies it's simply not a viable industry, it will collapse. And really important to support the passionate local campaigns that prevent these early adopter local power station projects happening. And we've been successful in that over the last 5 or 6 years with the liquid biofuels, and really that, as Alma explained to us earlier today, that the liquid biofuel for power is an industry that isn't going to happen. So this is an example of an excellent campaign in Avonmouth, who went to the site where this power station is going to be built and were unequivocal in their opposition, and sent messages that they will make it difficult if the investment is put in place. And also protesting against, they did a wonderful bike event, protesting against the palm oil plantation. And just the other day, they managed to force a proposal for a waste biomass gasified plant to go to planning committee rather than be decided by the officers, and it was thrown out by the councils. So there's jubilation going on there. Biofuelwatch also works through the proper channels and collating and gathering the evidence, so producing important reports. That was last year, the biomass chain of destruction, on the impacts of the industry at home and abroad, and earlier sustainable biomass, looking at the impossibility of sustainable certification in the industry, which is the government's answer. We will do sustainable biomass, we will certify. The Green Investment Bank, driving this week, we issue email alerts and thousands of people sign up, and it has real impact. The Green Investment Bank begged us to take it off our website. We are regularly visiting DRACs, and that keeps the issue in the public view. We got coverage in the Financial Times, including a leader last year saying Europe's biomass policies that are expensive blind alley. That's the sort of thing the investors read. Biomass Awards at an industry conference, a bit of lovely fluffy direct action at the AGM, the Green Investment Bank AGM, and we've set up a group in London, which you are welcome to join us on, the London Biomassive, to meet and prepare for these, to respond to these outbreaks of biomass. One of which was the Green Investment Bank's 2nd birthday, where we gave them an unequivocal message on a cake and then burnt the trees. This is the Biofuelwatch website. Please do visit. Resources on biomass at the top have frequently asked questions, which will give you the links to everything I've said today and more. Short 2- and 4-page reports on all sorts of interesting things, the long reports, and links to all the science, all the peer-reviewed articles that back up what we're saying. Take action to the historical protests and demonstrations we've done, and how you can get involved now. Please watch this 26-minute film, and that's basically, I will basically said all of that, but my email address is at the bottom. Please be in contact if this has moved you in any way. I will have sent round at the beginning of this bit a sign-up sheet, which you will all have signed up to. And finally, some ways you can get involved, but most importantly, come and attend our actions when we object to these outbreaks of biomass. And then finally, please, in all discussions of renewable energy, make a point of excluding industrial scale bioenergy. Thank you. I rest my case.